Today, we're diving into the story of Africville, a community right there in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And its story, well, it's an incredibly powerful one. It's about memory, for sure, but it's also about how a community was systematically neglected and then just completely erased. And it's about the fight for justice that took decades to unfold.
So, to really get what happened to Africville, you've got to understand there are two completely different versions of the story. On one hand, you have the official city narrative. They called it a slum, an obstacle holding back progress, and claimed removing it was actually a humanitarian act. But then you have the story from the people who actually lived there. To them, Africville was a proud, self-reliant community with deep roots, a home that was destroyed by the city's deliberate, systemic neglect.
To see how this all went down, we need to jump back to the mid-20th century. The city of Halifax had these grand plans for its future, and in their eyes, Africville was standing right in the way.
You have to picture the time. This is the 1950s, right? There's this huge wave of post-war optimism and this intense focus on economic growth. All across North America, older neighborhoods, often home to marginalized groups, were being bulldozed in the name of urban renewal and modernization. It was seen as the only path forward.
For Africville, the beginning of the end really came in the form of one single document, the Stevenson Report. This report made it official. It slapped the label of slum on the community and recommended clearing it all out to make way for industry and new port facilities. The whole thing was framed as a necessary step for the city's economic progress.
So that was the official story. That was the justification. But was it the truth? Let's peel back that slum label and really look at what life in Africville was actually like for the people who called it home. You see, far from being some kind of blight on the city, Africville was a real, functioning, tight-knit community. People owned their own homes, and this is a key point, they paid city taxes. They built their own school, their own church, the Seaview United Baptist Church, which was the absolute heart of their social and spiritual life. This was a real place where families were raised and neighbors supported each other.
And here's the kicker. The residents were paying taxes. So you'd think they get services in return, right? Nope, they got absolutely nothing. For decades, the city of Halifax just withheld the most basic services. Think about that for a second. No running water, no sewers, no paved roads, no garbage collection, not even police or fire protection. But it gets even worse. The city didn't just ignore them. They actively turned Africville into a dumping ground for all the things no other neighborhood wanted. An infectious disease hospital, a prison, a slaughterhouse, railway lines cutting right through. And then, the final insult. The city dump was moved to be, and I'm quoting the Africville Museum here, just a stone's throw from people's homes and their church.
So now let's look at how this plan for urban renewal was put into devastating action between 1964 and 1970. Let's look at the very real human cost of that decision.
Okay, so in 1962, the city council voted to move forward with the relocation. They made all kinds of promises: job training, help finding housing, a better life. The process started in 1964, and as each family was moved out, their home was immediately demolished, literally erasing the community bit by bit until the very last house was torn down in 1970.
And what did people get for this? Well, while some residents did have legal title to their land, many didn't, even though their families had lived there for generations. For those people, the city offered a flat payment of just $500. Can you imagine? $500 for losing everything? Your home, your land, your entire community? And if that wasn't enough, just look at how they were moved. I mean, this quote from the Africville Museum says it all. The city used its municipal dump trucks to move people's personal belongings. Dump trucks. It's just a perfect, brutal metaphor for the complete lack of respect shown to the people of Africville.
And you know, this wasn't just about knocking down houses. This was about destroying a culture. The Seaview United Baptist Church, I mean, that was the soul of the community, and they bulldozed it in the middle of the night. It was a deliberate move done covertly to stop residents from protesting.
But even though the physical community was gone, the story doesn't end there. Not even close. Its memory, its spirit, and the fight for justice, well, that was just beginning. The story of Africville refused to be erased.
Almost immediately, former residents and their descendants started organizing. For the next 40 years, they worked tirelessly to keep their story alive. They formed committees, preserved their history through genealogy, and they started getting national and even international attention. It all culminated in a United Nations report that actually called for reparations.
This fight for justice took so many different forms. You had incredible music, powerful plays, and essential books that made sure the story reached new people. They held annual reunions on the site to keep those community bonds strong. And you had protesters like Eddie Carvery, who held a vigil on the site for decades, a constant physical reminder of what was lost.
So let's look at the culmination of this long, determined struggle. It was a moment of official reckoning that took nearly half a century to finally arrive.
And then, finally, this happened. On February 24, 2010, the city of Halifax issued a formal public apology. The mayor, Peter Kelly, acknowledged the deep, profound injustice of what had been done.
Now, an apology like this doesn't just happen out of nowhere, right? It was the direct result of all that activism, but also new academic work that completely reframed the story. Scholars and activists successfully shifted the public's understanding of Africville from a story about progress to what it always was, a clear and undeniable story of racial injustice.
The apology also came with a settlement. It included $3 million to help rebuild the church, the return of 2.5 acres of land, and, importantly, restoring the name Africville to the park that the city had tried to rename.
And you know what? In 2011, they delivered on that promise. A replica of the Seaview United Baptist Church was built, right there on the shores of the Bedford Basin. Today, it stands as a museum, a place of memory, and a powerful, powerful testament to the injustice that happened, but also to the incredible resilience of a community that simply refused to be forgotten. So when you look at the whole story of Africville, it's such a stark reminder of how the idea of progress can be twisted to justify profound injustice. But then you see that rebuilt church standing there on that same land, and it leaves us with this really powerful question. What does it truly mean to rebuild a memory, and how do we make sure that stories like this are never, ever erased again?